iDaddy in 2025. When their cognitive development is so stunted that they need fairy tales to explain the world? His eyes locked onto Barron. Perhaps some of our more politically connected students would care to enlighten us? The tension in the room was palpable. Students watched, breathless, as the professor's thinly veiled attack hung in the air. But none of them, not even Anderson himself, was prepared for what happened when Barron finally stood up. Actually, Professor, Barron's voice cut through the tension, calm and measured, I would be happy to address your concerns about cognitive development. A smirk spread across Professor Anderson's face. Well, young Mr. Trump wants to educate us about intellectual capacity. He gestured theatrically. Please enlighten us about how your God fits into the modern world of quantum physics and artificial intelligence. First, Barron replied, maintaining his composure, I find it interesting that someone who champions intellectual discourse would resort to mockery instead of actual academic discussion. A few gasps echoed through the lecture hall. But since you brought up cognitive development, Anderson's smirk faltered slightly. This wasn't the fumbling response he'd expected. Oh, please, he interrupted, spare us the Sunday school lessons. I've spent 30 years studying cognitive development. Are you suggesting you know better? I'm suggesting, Barron continued, his voice gaining strength, that your bias is showing, Professor. You claim to follow the evidence, yet you ignore the countless brilliant minds throughout history and today who reconcile faith and reason. Newton, Planck, Collins. Ancient history, Anderson scoffed. Is God a MAGA fan too? Is that what you're going to tell us next? His attempt at humor fell flat as students watched Barron's collected response. You know what's fascinating, Professor? Barron stood straighter. You mock faith while displaying your own kind of religious devotion, a blind faith in your own intellectual superiority. You've created your own form of dogma, where anyone who disagrees with you must be cognitively inferior. The room fell silent. Professor Thompson leaned forward in his seat, watching his colleague's face redden. Anderson hadn't expected this level of articulation, this calm dismantling of his assumptions. His next words came out almost as a snarl. Fine, Mr. Trump. You want to debate? Let's debate. Come down here and explain to us all how your medieval beliefs survive scientific scrutiny. Show us this superior intellect of yours. As Barron began making his way to the front of the lecture hall, no one could have predicted how this challenge would end, least of all Professor Anderson himself. The lecture hall fell silent as Barron made his way to the front. Professor Anderson's stance was triumphant, clearly anticipating an easy victory over this young believer. But something in Barron's calm demeanor made a few students exchange worried glances. Since you mentioned quantum physics earlier, Barron began, his voice clear and steady, let's start there. You claim faith is incompatible with modern science, yet quantum mechanics itself has shown us that reality is far stranger than our limited human minds can comprehend.